What's up, guys? Welcome into Browns Film Breakdown. It is your Thursday, April 17th edition of the show. We have a great show lined up for you. Before we get to today's show, I do want to remind you of a couple things that have gone on at the website. You can go back and check out yesterday's recap of Dane Brugler's 7-round mock draft of the Browns, some insights on those players, and a little bit of information on why the Browns would pick them, what the fit is. Some of those names at the end of that draft were a little bit more unknown than I think people have seen, so I wanted to enlighten you guys on that. And then we touched on 5 mistakes I would like the Browns to avoid in this draft. We're going to continue some of that conversation today with Brad Ward. Before we get over to that conversation, a reminder, if you are just on the audio side, please come over and join the website for full unlocking of everything on the website that we have to offer, film rooms, newsletters, and obviously these full podcasts on an everyday basis. And then if you get to the founding members channel, you get a Slack specific contact where you can have Browns banter all day with a great group of guys and a growing community. And then obviously as well, you get that free Browns Film Breakdown swagger as well, a little cap and some other stuff that you can get to, some awesome exclusive things in there too. And that's what we have going on. If you are checking this out on the YouTube side, finding us without subscribing, go ahead and subscribe. Give us that thumbs up. Help us reach other folks in the space, Browns fans, NFL fans alike. We appreciate that very much. And on the audio side, subscribing to the podcast and then giving us a 5-star review, and one of those written reviews also helps us find more Browns fans as well. So thanks for being here, as I always say, and we hope you do join us at brownsfilmbreakdown.com. Some awesome opportunities to give us a free shot and a very affordable setup to join what I think is a budding and growing community of Browns fans getting pumped up for the draft, which we can't wait to cover for you, and we'll be live on YouTube for a large portion of that draft too. So a lot going on, still some big discussions around the second pick, some big philosophical things to hit on around the 33rd pick. We do all of that and more with Brad Ward. Let's get going with today's show right now. All right, welcoming in Brad Ward. You know him well. He's been around this show many times. I've been to his show many times. OBR colleagues for a long time. And anytime we get close to the draft, I want to hear his opinion, his thoughts, his analysis on this stuff, because I think the banter is always good and there's just good perspective here. So, Brad, I welcome you in, and we're going to start with the quote that we saw from Travis Hunter, kind of build on the idea that, I don't want to play football. I don't envision myself playing football unless I'm playing both sides of the football, right? That on the surface is a pretty heavy quote. I think that quote in a media setup feels to me like nothing new to the teams that have been doing dinners with him, meeting with him, talking with him. And I think, again, my opinion on it is that the surface, it looks like, whoa, that's crazy to say that. But that's also a 22-year-old who has expressed this opinion to NFL teams who I have to imagine are comfortable with it to an extent. And there's an understanding from both sides, at least, how this is initially going to go. I think there's a world in which obviously this doesn't work. He tries to initially play both ways. He either himself figures out it's too much, or the team puts a little bit more of a, hey, everything's good at the steakhouse when we're courting you to draft you, but now let's get down to real business. Yeah. And from his side, you're drafted, you sign a contract, the second overall pick slot's got a lot of money tied to it. Ultimately, you're going to do what the team wants you to do. But I think on the surface, the quote is heavy. But I think on the, when you step back from it, Brad, I think this is something that no matter if it's the Browns taking him or the Browns pass on him and maybe he goes on to pick 4 to New England or wherever, teams know this. This isn't a secret. And I think it's a matter of coming to an understanding of, if he's predominantly, as the Browns envision him to be, a wide receiver, what level of snap count is he comfortable with to be involved on the other side of the ball? Because what I'm saying is this, before I throw you the pass here, is like, if he's a wide receiver, that doesn't mean he's on the field every single snap. There are personnel packages. There's 12 personnel, 13 personnel, where one wide receiver only is on the field. Or in just, like I said, 12, or they're bringing maybe a little fullback into the fold this year, the 21 personnel. There's only 2 on the field. Maybe they want Tillman and Judy and give him a break. Like, what I'm getting at is there are baked in ways to give him a break. And also the same on the defensive side of the ball, where there's the dime, nickel, and various other things built in where they're bringing a third backer onto the field. Look at what the Browns did with Martin Emerson and Greg Newsome. Newsome would be in the slot traditionally, right, for some of those more nickel heavy sets, the 4-2-5 base things, or if they took that extra safety off the field and he was whatever. Like, I guess what I'm saying is there's probably some micro analysis that doesn't need to be done here, because I think it just comes down to, can he play 75% of the snaps in a game? And like, you're naturally going to find snaps that just don't require him to be on the field every play. But I do think he wants a serious role on both sides. And I think that is something teams are comfortable with. And if it was something he was getting a lot of pushback from with teams, I don't think he'd get in front of the microphone and say it. Like, if he met with the Giants and the Browns and whoever else, and again, totally my hunch here,
yeah,
I don't think he's getting up there and saying a week before the draft, when it would really cost him 5 or 6 slots maybe or more, I'm not playing football if you guys don't do this. I think teams are comfortable with it, while he's got an understanding of, like, we see you as a wide receiver. We need to make you the best player there. We also do envision a role on defense. And I think that's where it comes from. Whereas in Colorado, he never left the field, because obviously the NFL will present some different challenges and different variations of personnel groupings that you don't see so much at the college level on both sides. And I think there will be just baked in ways to give him chances to get breathers, get breaks, but still be really fresh when he's playing both sides. But I know some other people might have some hesitancy on some of that stuff. So I kind of throw it to you, because I know you've talked about it in recent days as well.
Yeah. So obviously big fan of him. I think he projects as my favorite wide receiver prospect in this draft. I think he's maybe my second favorite corner in this draft. But if I'm taking him at 2, here's the thing. Like, you made it sound like it's like I guess it's hard for me to envision him playing 75% of the snaps in an NFL game at 180 pounds. That's just, for me, I don't know how realistic that is to maintain health-wise over 18 weeks. I know the game's slower between plays and things like that, right, at the NFL level, and there's a lot of talk about that. I'm not saying he can't do it. I guess if I am the Browns, I want to see him, because I think one critique you can make about him is that, while incredibly gifted, I think he's a little raw on both sides of the ball. Like, you're projecting him as, like, at the next level, he can become this elite receiver and this elite corner. But is he all the way there? Like, is the polish there as a receiver? I don't think it's there yet. So, like, my first thing would be, like, let's get you to be the best wide receiver that you can be. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if that's job A, job 1 is for you to come in here and be an elite wide receiver. You know, the route tree, the everything, the nuances of playing the position at the NFL level. And then let's start working you in on the defensive side of the ball. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Like, you can use him here and there. I'm just hesitant to be like, yeah, we're going to start out of the gate working him on both sides of the ball. He's going to be in defensive room meetings. He's going to be in offensive room meetings. Like, for me, that seems like a ton for a kid that, to me, still needs polish as even a wide receiver. And that's what I'm drafting him as mainly. Like, I want him as an offensive weapon, first and foremost.
So would you say the second pick thing gets thrown out a lot, right? The idea of, like, well, if he's a wide receiver, is he good enough to be the second pick? Or if he's a corner, is that too high? It's like, well, don't you have to take that on a draft by draft basis where, like, what's the gigantic difference? And I'm just, this is something I've seen come up that I'm like, what's the gigantic difference between him at 2 and Denzel Ward at 4? Like, what's the gigantic difference in some of that? I think some of that stuff about, like, well, the only wide receivers we've seen selected second overall are this, so he has to be that. And I think that misses the mark on the type of like second overall pick level production you think a guy has to have. Obviously, the type of talent that's collectively an entire draft, obviously dependent on quarterbacks at the top sometimes, other blue chip caliber players. And I'm like, I don't get so much caught up on he's the second pick. I got to make it work because he's the second. To me, it's, do you think there's a difference maker here? Yeah. And I think if you think there's a difference maker here, primarily catching the football as we're watching, most of these are, all of these are receiver clips, then the question is, what does it take to get him to be, can he be really good at that while finding his way into a more reactionary position, which I think is the secondary room, which involves to me a bit more of what he's natural at, right? I think we could all agree the place that he needs to get a little better on this side of the football, the offensive side of the football, is just some of the nuances of the position, a little tempo change, a little hesitation, a little double move, how he's laying all that together. Obviously, the after the catch stuff is elite. The hands are elite. The tracking is elite. The body control is elite. There's just little things, but there's little things that you can obviously spend time in the coach's room, right? And work through some of those things, or spend time and on the field working on those nuances of the position, working with Jerry Jeudy, finding out how he does some things, how he views the position. And it's, to me, is there a lot of thought, repetition that goes into the offense, and we can find a way to make defense really easy for him? Yeah. Wouldn't that be the selling point with what we do defensively, with how Jim Schwartz thinks about defense? We basically play three coverages. We play a man shade outside corner coverage. We're funneling everything to a low hole sitter and a high hole sitter cover one. That's pretty simple in theory. Not everybody's good at it, but it's simple in theory. He can do that. We play some invert cover two, where we need you to be able to anchor and split and shade number one and number two and be able to run deep half. And we play a lot of cover three. They sprinkle in some cover two, like traditional cover two here and there. But would you agree with me in that this isn't a Vic Fangio defense? This isn't one of the more complex defenses to enter the league. So if I went to Jim Schwartz and I'm Andrew Berry and I said, hey, listen, we really like this guy. This is a really good corner that we think doesn't need much refinement. We think he can play for you, but we also really want to take him and play him a ton on offense and get the most out of him. And we think this guy could be a, think about the names that have been thrown out. And I think the low end is like, we think he's a version of Chad Johnson, which is Nate Tice's comp, which I think is fun. It's an interesting way to framework what he could be offensively. It's not one-to-one. I think Chad was a better route runner, sort of the nuance of the position, whereas Travis is obviously more explosion, better athlete, all that. But like, if Jim, could you play him in specific roles that gets him on the field for minimum 50% of your snaps and make it easy for him? Keep it simple. Can you do that? I'm asking you if you think that's possible, because I do. And if that's the case, we're going to play him all the time on offense. Think he's going to be a dynamic player over there. And we want to play him on defense. And again, what I'm getting at is a lot of times in those man coverages, Browns are playing man coverage 40% of the time. You know what coverage corners don't have in run defense? A run fit. They're usually chasing. They're secondary run defenders. So I'm just getting at, like, the contact won't be too dense if he's playing outside corner. The challenge, the burden, the thought, the preparation won't be too dense at that position. And I do think just innately he's pretty good at it, anticipatorily, the feel of the position, and sort of, again, the pattern matching stuff, because he sees the other side of the football, that I do think there's a world in which he's pretty comfortable with what they're doing defensively, spends, I don't know, Brad, 25 to 30% of the time there working with them, ironing out what they want from him that week. And then ultimately I'm spending almost all of the time I can getting better at the crafted wide receiver, and then obviously becoming the best version of it. So that's where I am. I don't know if you can get there. I also would say too, that this isn't like the decision they make at the beginning isn't the decision that has to happen when he's just 2 years into the league. Like, say they do this for 2 years. He's only 24. on a
Right.
5-year contract, and they pivot to him. Hey, this year I'm just going to be a full-time wide receiver. I'm not worrying about anything else, and that's where I'm best. Like, this isn't a defined thing. So if we think he's the best wide receiver prospect in the class, and there's just an ever so interesting hint that he could be this unicorn, he could actually be a really good corner too, and
Yeah.
he's proven the durability as is necessary for what is being asked of him, and that the weight wasn't detrimental. I understand the NFL is different, but it wasn't defiantly detrimental. Then I think that that's where it starts to be like, this just makes too much sense,
Yeah.
despite
That
natural concerns.
that is 100% enough for me to take him at 2. Like what you just described there. Like I see him as the top elite weapon on offense prospect that still has ceiling to grow into, right? And there's this hint of what he could be, this just incredibly generational special player that could do it on both sides of the ball. That's enough for me. The first part is enough for me in this year's draft to take him at 2, Jake, because you can only play the board in front of you. And this year's draft just has, for me, it has 2 blue chip players, 3 if you want to count Cam Ward.
Yeah.
Um, I
If this
include
is
him in that.
last year, you're taking the quarterback. This isn't even, he's not even a discussion here. It's not a
Correct.
thing. So
But
I just want to be kind of clear on that. I think that gets lost in the sauce a little bit. So I'm glad you're
yeah.
illuminating that.
Yeah, because I mean, that's what I've heard people push back on me when I've talked about Hunter and what he can do, and they're like, "Well, he would be the 8th or 10th guy taken last year." Well, I don't necessarily know if that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
But does that really even matter? No, it doesn't matter. We can only play with what we got here on the table.
Yeah, not all
Um,
drafts are created equal. That's something that, again, I
exactly.
think people get so confused about, and it's like, I get it. You're like, "Oh my god, the second pick. Well, is he
Yeah,
this or is he that?" And it's like, "Hey, I'm just worried about the right pick in this draft, right? I think you're easily taking one of the May or, Jaden Daniels last year. If you're sitting at 2, I can't sit here and be like, "Oh, they take Jaden." We all would take Jaden Daniels right now, right? So it's like, I'm just saying they were taking a quarterback in the same situation last year, even if I think they had, right, Brad? I don't even think this is crazy to say. Even if they had a pick and Watson was still like suspected to be the starter, I still think they would have gone a quarterback right there
yeah,
if
you
they
would
had
have
that
to. Yeah,
pick. You would have
yeah,
to. So, the thing we can do is apply action to what we know and what we see in front of us. And I think, despite thinking Abdul Carter is going to be a really fun, potentially really good edge player in the NFL, I just cannot in this cycle pass up what this player could ultimately be, who he has kind of overcome the odds every step of the way. And I think it's worth, when you're swinging for the most blue chip talent you can find in positions that matter, it just makes altogether too much sense. So I do think it's good to lay out where some of the concerns are, but also defining that this isn't like what they choose to do. You're not like picking a player's position in Madden, right? Like, you don't, it
yeah.
can be
You're not
edited.
stuck with it.
It
Yeah,
can be changed. It can be
it's
moved.
fluid. It can be
Yes.
a fluid situation with him, and it's interesting that you said that because um, I can see it, like what you're saying, him playing 50% of snaps on defense. I can see it. For me, I guess ultimately I'm hesitant at right away. Like, yeah, I can see that totally in year 2 or whatever, but I just want him to find his footing first. It would be my only concern, is him jumping in too fast to all of that. But yes, I see that. It's interesting that you think that he just steps in as an outside corner, because I've heard a lot of people be like, well, the best way to use him would be in sub packages as a nickel, or you make a special position for him where he's your third safety on the field or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's different ways you could use him. I
You
think that's
can, Brad. I think,
overcomplicating things a little bit,
yeah,
but
I want him thinking the least. And if he's most comfortable going from Colorado to the league as an outside corner because
perimeter
that's an
corner.
innate thing, then play him there. Like,
Yeah.
what I want, if I'm playing both sides, I guess what I'm getting at is, where can I put him that eliminates thinking as much as I can? Not that he's not a smart kid. He's an academic All-American. He's driven. He's talking about, I got 16 hours a day. I'm going to be living in the football universe. He says all the right things, right? Like,
He does.
and I do think he's a very smart kid. Yeah, he's a young man. I think he's a smart young man. So, like, where I'm getting at is, I'm kind of presuming he can't handle it. That's probably not fair as a presumption.
Yeah.
But what I do know is that I would like him to be thinking less on the field. So if
Yeah.
that is a part, so if a part of your offense is layered up in, like, how we call the system has a lot of like I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. John Gruden's doing some fun stuff right now in the quarterback school where he's kind of laying out how concepts work, and team will label concepts based on like 2-man concepts or 3-man route concepts. So like China will be 2 square ends and a corner route from the number 3 receiver, et cetera, et cetera. But then you get into some systems that will like, I always think of the play from Sean McVay, where it's not Sean McVay, it's actually Sean Payton, where he talks about like he tags a lot of routes. So his get really wordy because it'll be 82 F dagger Y cross Z blah blah blah. Like if he can play a position on offense that involves him just being kind of tagged into the route fold, or if it's a spot where they think he's best being labeled into 2-man route names, and like what I'm getting at is like, can you find a way to make both sides, at least as he enters the league and figures out the time management and all of that, make it as little amount of uncomfortable, both physically and mentally as possible? The good thing is at wide receiver, he played the slot his sophomore year predominantly, and then he went out to X his junior year last year. So there's a little bit of that. Obviously sitting down with him, hey man, where do you feel most comfortable? Where do you think your skill set meshes best? And then working that around Tillman and Judy is the plan. But on defense, like, hey, why would we take him and put him at safety and sort of make him uncomfortable? Why would we take him and put him at slot if he's not as naturally, innately comfortable? So that conversation, I'm sure, has already transpired in those dinners, in those meetings. Where do you feel comfortable? Hey, if you want to play both ways, tell us where you're most comfortable playing both ways. And those deeper, more complex conversations are happening. You cannot do this without a really strenuously laid out plan. And I have to have faith that they have done the groundwork on this. I think John Harbaugh's quotes the other day were pretty interesting in terms of like what he envisions it, which kind of meshes with what we're saying. I don't think you are like putting him on the field to be a detriment or a liability to your defense. So it's about finding the ways in which he can think the least amount on that side of the ball and play with those instincts that I think you would agree with me are what makes him a separator on that side of the football. So that's what I hope can happen. And I have to believe if they take him, that's the plan to make happen.
Yeah. And you said it, right? Like ultimately, you're going to bet on what I'm betting on here is what we've seen on film and the person. Like he's obviously very highly intellectual and has a tremendous work ethic. So I'm not worried about that. Like I'm not worried about him figuring it out. I'm worried about it being too much physically, I guess, at the beginning. But that's what's fluid, right? So you can find that comfort where he's comfortable doing this on offense and this on defense. I just want to make sure that he's the best weapon he can be on offense for me. Regardless, though, to your point, if they're going to take him, they've had these conversations and they're comfortable with it, or else they wouldn't be taking him. So the plan is laid out. And if they're going to take him to, they've already discussed this with him. They're both comfortable with the situation and so on and so forth. And they will find that perfect mix for him. I mean, he's just special. And I guess for me, I find more value right away, obviously, on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, partially because of the team, but partially because of who he is as well.
Yeah, you can't ignore the team thing. It's a real element. You do too much of that, you ignore how to win football games. So I think that there's unfortunately a little bit of an innate part of that whole thing that takes place. The other thing I want to hit on, ironically, is his teammate and kind of what is popularizing itself. Now, Dane Brugler didn't do any trades, I think, in his 7-round mock, but everybody who's doing 1, 2s, and 3s right now, pretty much every national voice is projecting a trade up. And that to me is staggering. I mean, it's a matter of like, let me be careful. The Browns have the most draft capital in the class, the cycle here, but they only have 4 picks in the top 100. So it's not that much. It's nice, but it's not that much. It's really heavily in those late picks that they get the extra boost, right? So, I laid out yesterday on my pod, Brad, that one of the 5 mistakes I wanted them to avoid in this draft was reaching on a quarterback. I just think giving up when you have two positions to me that are borderline, are they NFL playable or not? The safety position has a massive void. The running back room has a massive void. Those are just two, just basic, not even the most like, hey, we want to draft players at these prime, and we obviously are not even talking about quarterback, but we are saying like those are two I would say, vital positions that you wouldn't want to spend, you don't love unless you got just like a Kyle Hamilton type, right? Or somebody of that mix drafting a safety high. You don't like, same thing for running back. Obviously, Genty types are there, but they're not fitting the mold for what the Browns need right now. But those are two positions they need raised. And it's like you have some spots that you can do this, but you also have some risk factors in place where like we don't want to pass up on a tackle because we know how important that can be for the future of an evolving offensive line room. We also might really like an edge if we take Travis early, an edge player that can come in and be a more of a anchor or a potential bright spot for down the line, right? Where if you're not taking Abdul, can you still find somebody there in the second round? So like it's a bit complex. And I think that like, hey, we'll, move a future to, and we'll give you 33, 67, and we'll come up to 20 or whatever. It's spicy, and I just don't. It's popular to do right now. I think largely because people want to believe these quarterbacks are all going in the first round, and they're kind of mocking like, how do I get this quarterback into the first round? Well, let's have the Browns, who are obviously at pick 33, the closest to the first round. Let's have them trade up. Mike, my thing here, and you tell me, I want you to kind of go with this where you think is like, I'm in the spot of like, I want to let it come. I want to let it land in my area. If I love one of these guys and pick 30, 31, or 32 is sitting there and they're there and you're like, boy, I cannot wait another minute, I'm interested. But otherwise, I don't want to give up anything of meaning. So I'm not moving up to 24 or 20, or I even think someone had them at 15, moving up that far. That's a lot to me. And it's like, if you have that conviction to move up 16, 17 picks in the draft, wouldn't you just take the guy at 2? Like, why would you want to risk it? So I'm at the spot where like, I love the 33rd pick in this draft because it's if we're talking about a draft, and I know you've heard this too, where they're saying there's a lot of similarities between a player picked 10th and a player picked 40th. There are going to be teams over that evening, the first night to the second night, that are just going to be like chomping at the bit to come up and get that pick potentially, or you're in a great spot to navigate what you want. So I'm just like, I don't want to operate from a position of, I don't know. It's just being desperate a little there. And it's like, if you're so desperate, if you're so desperate for that player, then why don't you just trade a couple spots down from 2 and take him at 4 or 6 or something along those lines? If you're not convicted to take Hunter, then move down a couple picks and take that quarterback where you think it's more applicable for somebody desperate to come up and get Hunter. So I just am like not in that love. That's not my thing. So I want you to respond to that, because I know the big 3 here with Milroe obviously being in the full 2 are the ones being discussed, and I'm curious if you like one of them enough to do something borderline aggressive.
Borderline aggressive. Yeah, I think I look at Pittsburgh at 21 as kind of a pivot point in the first round, right? So like if you get past, if Shador were to get past 21, I think I would start to explore what you could get back up for. But I'm not going into the teams because once again, at that point, as you already laid out, you're paying a price at that point that is, it's not worth it. You should have just taken him at 2 or traded back and taken him, to your point, where it's if you're reaching into next year's, second or whatever, like you said, a 33 and 67. 33, Jake, should be a starter and a 2 contract player. It's a first round pick.
Yeah.
Like, to pass up on that to go for to either move up, or even, here's where I get hesitant. Like, I love Milroe, right? Like, and I think he has a huge ceiling, but he's a project. Let's not, another guy where you want to bet on the kid. And if he falls to you at 33 or even 32, where you could just flip the Eagles a 7th round pick and add that 5th year contract onto it or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, I get that, But like, I still have concerns about taking him there when you hear Jimmy say, "We're not going to force it. We're not going to force it." In his press conference, Jimmy Haslam talking about, well, I don't want to force it. If you're not going to force it at 2, don't force it at 33. If your plan is to come back next year and get super aggressive, then why am I taking a project at a spot where I can get a starter someplace else at 33? It's a super valuable pick. And I worry about spending capital on a project that could be spent on something critical, an 8-year starter somewhere on your team, if you're just going to turn around and go crazy after a quarterback next year or the year after.
Yeah, especially a class that we presume is going to be a little better next year, but you could also manipulate it and try to find your way into the fold to get inside the top 10 to find one you like. Something Minnesota did to get JJ McCarthy, who they liked, right? That's
Yes.
the sort of move you're looking to do. I am fine, and I know you are too. I'm fine with them taking a quarterback at 33 if they really like them. I'm also
Yes.
fine with moving up a spot or two to ensure you get that player, right? And I can be down with that. But what I'm just super nervous about, which is like this prevailing thought in some of these bigger mocks, is like jumping heavily forward, where I'm like, why are you not just moving down then to
Yep.
take that player at a spot that you could ultimately gain some more, and then maybe go after an Emeka Egbuka or a Luther Burden or something along those lines with accumulated picks to attack. Like if you think Hunter's a wide receiver, then there are other wide receivers you could get a little hungry for there too. So those are the two biggest things I wanted to hit on with you, Brad. They're certainly the ones that are just becoming popular. I think they're becoming the least kept secret now is Cam. One, it feels like the Hunter 2 thing is real, and hashing out what that first year looks like, I think, is really interesting. And then the swing pick here is like, is there a tackle they love at 33? Is there a pass rusher, or is there a quarterback? Because that feels like it's all set in stone there. Before we go, I got to ask, because it's going to be a popular position with Nick looming and some lack of talent in that back. Which running back are you into the most of this sort of group?
So obviously love Hampton and a ton, but he's an easy one to call out, right? Love Trevion Henderson. Think he's super special. If they could get him, I think he's like his ability explosive. But this class is, I mean, there's like 30 some draftable running backs. It feels like in this class. I feel like you should have one, maybe come away with 2, or at least a UDFA, priority UDFA from these running backs. But there's guys later down. Neal from Kansas, I'm a big fan of. Harvey, huge fan of. All of these guys I think can be special. And then a guy that like even later who didn't test well, but reminds me of his Bucky Irving, Jordan James, I like a lot from Oregon, as well as somebody that is just like Bucky Irving, who was super successful for in the NFL last year. So for Tampa. So I think that there's so many fun guys in this class, but those are a couple of names that have kind of stuck with me early and late.
Love it, Brad. We appreciate it, buddy, very much. I know you're doing great work at the OBR, hosting shows all week and putting out mock drafts and content. And we listen, brother, we appreciate you. You got it?
I appreciate you, man. You got it.
All right, I got it, man. We're out of here, guys. Thanks for stopping by. We appreciate you listening to us blabble on about this draft class, and we're under a week, so we will try to pull in some more voices. Brad's one of the ones we wanted to get to, so we're happy that we got it. Check back tomorrow. More great content, more podcasts will be delivered to you, so keep your eye out for that. That's enough for us. As we always say, go Browns.